Hello everyone, people of YouTube, I guess. It's the trendy thing to say. Sam here, Real Love Guitars, a bit under par, not my normal energy-filled self, but we're looking at Michael's Harley Benton TE, I've forgotten the TE FLT or something like that. Hold on, I'll tell you now. It is designated TE90 FLT. TE90 FLT, and it's brand new, straight in from Thomann, telly style guitar with a couple of these filtertron-esque pickups on it. An interesting, good-looking green finish. Three-way switch, toggle switch between the two positions, and we've got a basic volume and tone. We've got an interesting non-beveled scratch plate, a very basic bridge, functional but basic. Obviously a through body fixing. Yeah. You know, great looking green and black, sort of vintage style tuners, made in Indonesia. Sort of what we call this, a matte or very matte satin, nearly matte finished neck. Big control plate. Yeah, so it's a good looking beastie, a full thickness body. There are a few finish kind of blemishes which you may, I mean, maybe no surprise really for a guitar as inexpensive as this. I think it's probably not more than about 120 quid maximum. I could be wrong. I just looked at it, but I didn't look at the price, funnily enough. Anyway, that's not so important right now. So this is in for a setup. It comes with a Tusq nut fitted, so we're going to retain that and use it and make a small adjustment if necessary. But we're going to lower the action, check the neck relief, and do any fret leveling that's needed. Frets are not bad, maybe a little sharp at the edges, but actually not the end of the world if we look up close. You know, there's a lot of talk about how Harley Benton's come out of the box. That's not a bad fret end there. Look, judging by the little marks to the edge of the where have my fingers gone? Little either side of the edges. Yeah, it looks like somebody's taken a little file to them, maybe a bit carelessly in places like that. But overall, you know, they've been rounded. They're fairly good. We've got these Roswell. I guess I don't know what the names. It probably says in the spec, but I'm not very good at looking at that. Roswell 51579 940s. Yeah, a big old designation for quite a cool looking pickup with the sort of toastery covers. One comes with cellophane on it still, and another one comes without it, which is odd. So but it's not bad looking, and that's an incredibly bog standard, inexpensive Chinese bridge or Far Eastern bridge. But again, what's it got to do? It's just got to work as a decent set of saddles, adjustable, and it's pinned down by 5 chunky screws. Yeah, so sorry if I'm a bit kind of bleh, if I seem a bit I don't know what the word is, weak and feeble. Is because I've had this blasted shingles for the best part of 3 weeks, probably a bit more now. Nice feel. I'd be interested to know what the pickups sound like, just briefly. I don't suppose they'll sound like anything other than some nice humbuckers, I think, but it's essentially what they are. I don't know if there's any other kind of technology involved, but Yeah, so I've been under the weather. The never having had shingles before, it's such a silly sounding, jolly little sounding illness. I think, I don't know about anyone else, but because of its sweet little funny name, I've not really paid it any attention. You know, it doesn't grab your attention. Anyway, and so apparently what it does is it's a case of the chickenpox virus that's left after you have it. It's left in your nerves, and it sits in your nerves for years, and then it comes out when it feels like it, or when your immune's low. It's got a distinctive sound to it, I think. Yeah, a bit sharp on the frets. Well, it's going out of tune. We sort of expect it, really. So it's set. The action's set pretty high right now, so we're going to lower that in a minute. Well, I have to say, a lot of brightness in those pickups. much brighter, much brighter than many other things. So there's kind of a distinct erring on the side of top end there, I would say. So yeah, if you hear me grunt, it's because all of my nerves inside underneath my rib cage are damaged, and at risk of sounding hyperbolic, I described it as being like as if I'd been in a shark accident, a shark attack 6 months ago, and now 6 months on, my nerves are beginning to recover. So look, we have a quick measurement here of the playing action at the last fret, and it's 3 millimeters, so it's way too high. Now that's going to obviously come down in a minute. And let's just double check, quick check on the neck relief. The neck relief is almost non-existent, but it will be okay for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the action to closer to our target. And the first question we've got is there enough scope in just the grub screws on the saddles? It may or may not be. We've still got a way to go. My target on this kind of guitar would be 1.5 millimeters at the last fret and 1.2 on the high fret. Now this one doesn't seem to want to sit down properly. Something getting in its way. I hope it's not something obstructing the saddle, but okay. So we're getting close to it, but we're still, we're just a bit over. I think we'll get there on all of these, but I'm having to press them down, press the saddle down a bit just to make sure it actually gets there. It's like it doesn't want to sit down on its own unless it's pushed. So. Uh-oh. Here we go. Right, let me take all these down. So straight away I'm seeing that this very tall action on this default out-of-the-box guitar suddenly translates, when lowered at this point in time, is translating into a pretty not very good amount of buzz. It is a bit flat on the neck relief, so we might just adjust that slightly, but hang fire for a second. Yeah, yeah, that's the weirdest thing about this shingles, is it does feel like having some sort of huge trauma. You know, and it feels like, you know, imagine 6 months passes and this is how you'd feel recovering from that significant trauma. It's not nice at all. And it's made it impossible to do anything for the last couple of weeks, really. Wrong one. Yeah, so, you know, loads of people have it. Some people, I guess, have a worse reaction to it than others. I'm not really sure there's anything that dictates why one person has it worse or better than another, but it's all told it's pretty vile. And unfortunately what it does is it damages the nerves endings, and so whatever the bad patch it gives you, it can stay like that forever and ever. So I'm hoping that it doesn't stay like this forever, because I'm still in quite a bit of pain even whilst doing this. No, I don't want to meddle, because I had to get back on the case sometime or other, but it's not nice. So problem is there is a vaccine, an antiviral vaccine that you can get, which does help, but I think you have to know when the attack is just before it attacks or something, and then you may be able to catch it in time. Doesn't sound very helpful, so I didn't catch it. I have to be honest, I'm not a fan of upside down tuners. I find them just hard to get to for no good reason, but I know it's a style thing. Okay, well the first thing is we're now hitting the pickups, which we can take down for starters. They were uneven to begin with anyway, so okay, let's see what we've got. Just double check the relief again. That's practically flat now, so it's not going to be enough. We need a little bit of relief in it. The guitar technically can play when it's flat, when the neck is dead flat, but it makes it difficult. It's a little bit harder because you're doing away, or you don't have any space for the strings to spin in. And there's a bit more relief. Of course, one of the problems you get with a brand new guitar straight from the factory is the strings need stretching out a lot. So I think these are 10s. But I think Michael wants 9s on. I'll double check. So, always back across here, double check these. Having done the bit on the relief, we got 1.6 there, tiny bit too much, but not bad. Again, it's sitting on its deck now, and that's as low as it's going to go. So if we wanted to go any lower than exactly 1.5 on this guitar, we would have to shim the neck a tiny bit, so it's not going to play along. So we got just over 1.5, just under, over. Yeah, long way. So we're at the edge of what the geometry of this guitar on its own will let us do. Okay, so we've got a very flat neck with some relief. We've got slightly too high first fret action still. We've got a pretty much on target, that's a bit high at this end, nearly on target last fret action. A bit of checking and tweaking to do, and a sort of choice of whether we put a shim in there or not. So at this state of play, what I want to do is check all the individual notes. Actually pretty good, I have to say. Oh. Yeah, very good all round. I mean, there's a little bit of fret slap down at this end, plus the fact we're a bit out of room to lower anymore. I don't think, since we're not going to go there in reality, I don't think I'm going to shim this. You know, we're just about at the 1.5 mils on the last fret as it is. I would be shimming it to gain what? A fifth of a millimetre, if that. So what I'm just going to do here is I'm going to take out the original string trees, hold the other ones down so it doesn't tear out, hold the strings down so it doesn't tear out at the point we remove it. Put them over there. We're changing these out for the Tusq ones. Now the Tusq ones have a bigger screw, slightly bigger screw. So we're going to get a little bit bigger thingy. So what's that one? 2.5. That's a bit too big. Yeah. Yeah. So we're just going to widen these holes a tiny fraction. Yes, for me, I'm not used to being ill for any length of time, and this shingles business has kicked me into touch, as they say. It's been a very peculiar and unpleasant 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm very bad at accepting that I can't do anything. But I've had to sort of avoid the workshop. I've done a little bit of work at home. Finished off a couple of guitars, jobs that needed doing, but you know, had to willfully stay away. But anyway, so I figured that finally this evening was going to be a return to the workshop for this setup. Overdue. Had bit overdue anyway. Even if I'm grunting and wheezing a bit. So yeah, this virus sticks around since when you were a child, when one was a child, and then it it comes out. It decides to come out, and then when it comes out, it ends up hurting like hell. Now I'm just gonna, what I'm doing at this point, I'm just gonna take off these strings off to the side. Probably need to slack them off a bit. Yeah, so it sort of inflames all the, wherever the ends of the nerves are, and you tend to get, most people get a sort of nasty rash that comes up and blisters. I guess a bit like as if you were suffering from thingy chickenpox in the old days. I can see there's some fret leveling, I think, being done here in the factory. It's very subtle, so I don't think it's a lot, but I do feel this first one has a look of something that's had a run-in with the leveling tool. See that at this end here? That looks a little bit flattened out. There's also some string wear on there already. You can probably see it right at the edge, or over both the E and the A. See that? The E and the A. A little mark on the D. So, yeah, I mean, standard frets on these things. Who knows how long they last or how soft they are. Yeah, anyway, so, yeah, if you ever get in a situation where you think you're getting shingles, I think you'd probably start off with a feeling of tenderness from your back round to your front. And in my case, it goes through my gut, which is horrible. And I thought I had some sort of, I don't know, gastroenteritis or, you know, stomach something problem. But it was just this pain that wouldn't move. And then the rash sort of came up, and Claire did the usual, oh, well, let me have a look online type of thing, and she's very good at identifying what's what. So we pretty quickly narrowed it down to shingles, and went into, no, we rang the doctor, and they put a prescription through for antiviral stuff, which I started taking, but eventually, after about 10 days of taking that stuff, I didn't feel any improvement at all, and I was still in so much pain I haven't been able to sleep. I think last night was the first night I slept for a long time. I still woke up in pain in the morning, but I slept at least. Anyway, but I wasn't getting much sleep, and I rang the doctors, and then they went in and had a sort of a double check, and they confirmed, yes, that's shingles, and you just have to live with it, basically. And if it's done some damage and you're stuck with that residual pain, well, bad luck. So you'll have to learn sort of some degrees of acceptance there. But I think it's improving slowly. My fingers are crossed on that matter. Anyway, it's still very painful. Should look up what the neck is made of. I will in a minute. It's a funny exotic stuff, but we shall see. So I just want to get it to pitch roughly without breaking any more strings. Breaking any strings. Okay, so those are all ready for a very light leveling. Oh, reach up. I want to reach up and grab you. Okay, what was I going to? I was going to look at the thing, but I'd have to turn all the thing on and risk interference. Well, anyway, it's an unusual, or to me, it's an unusual looking finish on the neck, or not finish, unusual looking wood. It looks a bit dirty to begin with, which is okay, but it's not like maple, shall we say. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is I'm aiming to very carefully level out any unevenness in these frets, mainly really chasing the fret slap that's on the lower strings around here, but I'll do all of them as I go, just to be on the sort of safe side, so we know what the neck's doing. Also, this can help show up quite quickly. Shows up where the high and low spots are on a neck, but it also can tell us very quickly what's been leveled before, and we can sort of understand a bit more about the history of the neck. So just looking at it from a diagnostic point of view, there are some ups and downs in this neck. There's a low spot here, there's a low spot here, and the rest are either side of it. So again, nothing unusual about that. That's quite completely common in all necks. I mean, it has to be it's a rare occasion where you won't have it in a neck. So again, at this point, I don't need to level much further, if at all. Just wanted to ensure that everything's nice and clear. And we know that the bends are mostly good, but they will come into effect on the G track, where the G string goes anyway. So I won't worry about that until the next one after this. So we'll use the same calibration again now. Don't forget, I've got to do a very small reduction in the first fret action after this, using the my nut slot files. Let's have a look again. Good. Slightly low spot, not too bad now, still low here. Hardly any leveling going on at all, which is good. Okay, now we're going to recalibrate for the G track. There was, when I bent, there was a tiniest hint of zinging on some of these bends, high E bends into the G track, and that was really, that was being hypercritical to find something to notice. So we'll take care of that anyway with this little bit of leveling. There's nothing major getting in the way. Good. High-ish area here and a high-ish area there. But again, it's still very small amounts of material. I'm going to do a quick bit more, just focusing between the 10th and the 12th fret there. Yeah, so when it comes to shingles, my dear friends, if you ever get a sort of sensitivity suddenly out of nowhere on your skin that kind of tracks from your back even around up your front, get down to your doctors and ask them if it's shingles, and if it is, get yourself some antiviral stuff early. Good. And if you're over 65, I think it is, then take advantage of the shingles vaccine ASAP whenever you can, because I would not wish this on anyone. I would also don't ever want it again. That's assuming it clears up and I get past this darned discomfort. Anyway. High spots there, high spots there. So on the whole, I think the frets on this were surprisingly good. Yeah, a little bit sharp at the edges. Hopefully we'll take care of that as well in the overall sanding back, or sanding the frets after recrowning them. Yeah, so it's going to end up being pretty good. So we're not changing the nut, so it's a little bit of money saved on the nut itself. I still have to do the first fret action to get it exactly right. And it's actually a little bit more precarious without the replacement nut. If we were replacing a nut, I often find it easier to get to the exact first fret action. Can be a bit harder to do when the nut is already in place. So now at this point in the neck, I'm leveling for what I call fret slap, as opposed to any uneven frets, individual uneven frets. So I'm trying to allow the natural curve of this leveling beam to sort of impose itself on the topography of the neck, which is actually a little bit up and down relative, as you heard me referencing some low and high spots. It's those little variations that make it a little bit difficult, or it makes the strings clatter on the frets. There isn't quite enough room for them to move. So, and of course you can overcome all of that by setting your action very high. It's good. But that's of course not what everyone wants to do. Very few people want to. That's what we used to do as kids, if you remember, when we first got our first ever guitars, and we were obliged to set the action as low as it could go before it buzzed, and after that we had to live with it. So we don't want to be forced to do that here. So hence I'm setting the action I want and making the frets work to that action. And of course, part of that involves knowing that it can do it. Pound for pound, an average standard electric guitar can go to this sort of playing action with a relatively low, flat, relatively flat relief curve, and a low first fret action. So it helps to have the experience to know, how that will play, or know that kind of action will play. Once you know that, then you can set your guitar for it, set your action the way you want it within that scope, and work the frets so that they play ball. Just going to concentrate a little bit more on the 12th fret. And then once I've done this, it'll be a matter of time to recrown the frets and then sand and polish them. Fine, I'm happy with that. I'm warm, and I'm not warm. What temperature is it in here? 18.7, so 19 degrees. So it is fairly warm. Everything here is killing. Okay, so actually what I'm also going to do is I'm going to get a drill bit, slightly wider drill bit. Where's it gone? I need the wider drill bit. Come along. And I need to just make a guide, because I need to drill slightly deeper on these holes, but I obviously want to stay well within the range of not doing any damage. So mark it off. There we go. Okay, so that's good. Oh, well, while we're at it, now we need to do the excuse me, the nut slots. So we need our nut files and our micro thingy. That thing is called our feeler gauge. Is car feeler gauge. Metrics, we're going to go 0.3. So, yeah, quite a bit higher right now. So I'm going to just drop those off to the side if they will oblige. And we'll start with the G, that's way off. So we're on the 17 here. Now I'm going to start cutting backwards on the 17. Now the difficult thing about this is cutting a slope backwards without cutting it too low. These, believe it or not, even though they're expensive, these aren't the most dependable of devices to control a cut like this. I actually find that the triangular jeweler's type files work better for this. They're more dependable. Also with this challenge is you've got to cut the slope backwards, but it does mean that you're going to end up touching the finish on the back of the headstock. It's practically impossible to slope the slot without doing that, but slope the slot you must, because if you don't, the note will be dead. So unfortunately, it's going to be the way it's going to have to be, that it touches down on the, or it sometimes just touches down on the neck, the finish behind there. Close for now. Okay, on the B, 13. size, 13. That's pretty close. A tiny bit more. 13. Okay, looking at that, eyeballing it. Then we go for the first one, which is the 10. Yeah, that thing about sometimes when people go, oh look, the luthier's hit the finish behind the nut. If your luthier is getting you the correct low first fret, then very often that will be unavoidable, because you have to have that first fret action, and the only way you can get it is by it's so low relatively. The manufacturers don't. Ideally, you don't want any horizontal fingerboard beyond this nut, because all of that's going to guarantee to get in the way of cutting downwards if you have a very low action at the first fret, and of course we do, so therefore it's starting out with that problem. But if you see a luthier having done that before, you now know that that's why, because they're aiming first and foremost usually to give you the correct first fret action, and they also at the same time they know it needs to be cut backwards in a slope, or backwards slant. That's good. Blue one on the 36. Quite low. And on the 46, these thicker ones, funnily enough, are the hardest ones to do. They seem to try and run out of control faster than anything. You can very quickly overcut them. Yeah, that's good. I'm just noticing something on this. I wondered about this, whether this is some sort of wrap, and I actually think it is. I don't think it's a finish. I think it's a wrap. I know I may be cursed for saying such a thing. The reason I'm thinking that is because we've got a similar thing at this end. Look at that. You see the veneer, well, a wrap or a veneer, but it goes all the way round. So I'm wondering whether it's just a wrap. I don't know if they can maybe make the same finish, very, very thin veneer, and then stick it, as you can see. It's glued to there and coming away a little bit there. So, hey, who knows? The mysteries of the construction method. I mean, it looks great anyway, so I suppose it would reveal itself a bit down the line when you've played it a lot. And maybe it wore through and something weird and wonderful happened on there that you might not have anticipated. Anyway, so that's the leveling part done. Now we've got, excuse me, take these strings off, put my leveling beam away. Thank you, strings, you've been helpful. I think what I'll do is get my speeded up windery thing out. Where's somebody with my aches? Need all the ease I can get. It's very interesting to kind of look at the construction of these things and see if you can figure out how they were made. And that's the things that catch my eye are the uniformity of this. I couldn't really see any real grain, and yet there appears to be some, but it's, I don't know. I mean, if it was a wrap, it would be fairly hard to do as well, wouldn't it? Who knows? I guess when we have a look underneath, we should see when we look inside the, I don't know, electrics cavity, for example. Yeah, now the saddles, the way this bridge is done, the saddles want to sit up higher than we want them. So to make this play, we're depending on the strings pulling down the saddles, which is not, again, not perfect the way I'd want it, but the alternative is a shim in the neck, which probably be better off without. Okay, so I'm just going to clean up the dust. I'm going to just drill a little bit further in with this widening screws because they're a little bit tight still. Also, I'm noticing, is that, I think it's not wide enough. I think I've wimped out on the width here. I think I need this to go down to the correct depth, which it doesn't first, and then I need to widen the top part second. Guides are most crucial. So a bit wider at the top, and that allows us to go all the way in, but stops us splitting the wood or risking splitting the wood. Okay. So the next part of the process is to crown the frets. Where I've levelled, they will be a little bit more flatter than the rest of the frets. So we need to mark them up with mark pen, and then we'll recrown, which basically sounds grand, but we're basically taking the slightly flattened off fret and just rounding it so that it goes back towards the arch shape that we had to begin with, and it does it whilst retaining or preserving the relative levelness of the different frets relative to each other. So it's a very nifty way of doing things. Then once I've done that, I will mask off the fingerboard, and I will use various grades of sandpaper and so on to, I might do a little bit of end for filing as well, and then we'll polish out with all the different grades of sandpaper, polish out the frets. What am I doing? Oh yes, that's what I'm doing. Crowning, recrowning. Right. So these are, I would say, medium size. So to recrown, what I'm doing is just working this tool across the top of the fret. So it's interesting, this first fret is showing up that it has had a fair bit of leveling in the past on this near side to me. But it's what I could see, so it's not really that much of a surprise. Most of these you'll see me whiz through fairly quickly because the amount of leveling that's happened is minimal. I'm expecting to find a bit more leveling has happened on this edge, because that's where I was working to free up the what I call fret slap. So a little bit on this edge, move on. And then where I stay in one place a little bit longer is where I took more material away, because the fret was more uneven than neighbours. It's neighbours. How am I going to tell what this cap is, or this veneer or photo finish is on this guitar? I think I'll open the electrics cavity. That's probably the first place, or the toggle switch cavity. You should see in there. So I'm going to do the masking tape and sanding business off camera, just because I'm feeling a bit ragged and tired. I know, it's pathetic, isn't it? I've been about an hour or so and I'm tired. But I'm just tired from being ill, that's what it is. So I'll probably do that off camera, and then just come back for the final bits of restringing, stretching the strings out, and checking and setting the intonation. So kind of moving along through this pretty quickly. So nothing's been had to have been leveled heavily. It's all pretty minor. There we go. That's all the frets recrowned. Again, give it a little bit of a dust down. So the next bit, which I'll stop shortly on, but just to tell you, pointed out, is going to be masking it off and sanding out with a load of different grades of paper, which is tiresome and noisy. Alright, so I'll go and do this offline, off camera, and then I shall come back when it is done. Okay, so we're nearly done. Polished out all the frets. I've also done some end filing to round them off a little bit more, and polished them off as much as is possible. Now time to restring. Let's do it. Now this part is very important, the restringing, well, the restringing isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is the stretching out part after you've restrung. So I'm just going to get all my strings back here. It's not very exciting to look at. So for tuning stability, you need two things to be right. You need, first of all the slack to be stretched out of your strings. And secondly, you need to have your nut made of the right material with free running slots and the correct first fret action. If you get those two things, the slack and the nut, right, you will have a guitar that stays in tune and plays in tune and stays in tune. And it is a, well, you can't overestimate how important that is. I've said this before, but when I was young, maybe when most of us were younger, we kind of were interested in other things. You know, what was the brand name? What did it look like? You know, what pickups were in it, and all those things. Right down to last on our list was, did it play in tune, and did it stay in tune? And often we had to work with guitars that just didn't, and they drove us mad. And that, my view is that when we get older, we probably finally work out that what matters is a guitar that plays and stays in tune, and if it does, it's the one that we peg and go for each time. So, what am I looking for? I'm looking for, see, I really don't like this back to front stringing business. So I'm going to line up all the tuner holes if I can. Come on. Right. Nearly there. Right. Okay. So I'm now going to put on the D first. So I come up to the end, pull the string through taut, grab it at the first fret and pull it back one fret, and then I'm going to hold it down. Since all of the tuner's on the wrong side now, I'm running backwards. Oops, I have to go the other way. Wind it on, and I make sure that the held string, the taut string, goes over the loose string the first time round. What am I in? No, I'm in the wrong place here. Wait a minute. No, that's right, I'm in the right one. So it goes over the loose one first time and then under the second time. And then we just pull it up like that and snip off the excess. Flush as possible so we don't get any bits sticking into us. And I'm going to do the G. So all the way through. Go up to the first fret, pull it back one, hold it down, start winding it on. So over the loose, hold the taut one over the loose one first time round. So sometimes you have to lift it up like this. Guide it over the top, and then as it comes around this time, it helps if we pull up the loose one, and then we'll just push the held one under this time, and then set it in the slot and let it come up. And that keeps a sort of minimum amount of string, enough to hold the string and lock it securely, but not so much that it builds up a ton of slack. This business about the slack and the strings is quite intriguing. Some people think that you can tune it up a semitone, leave it overnight, and everything will be all right. It will somehow stretch itself out by the morning. And it's really not the case. You have to physically put effort into getting all the stretch out of, or the slack out of your strings. But if you don't, the consequence is that you'll be, the little tiny bits of stretch will be kind of venting themselves fraction by fraction throughout your playing of the guitar, and months on end it can take to finally stabilize. You know, it can drive you mad before you even get to that point. get all our strings on first with as little extra wire as is necessary. Don't go beyond, don't go less than that whole fret's worth on the plain thin strings, because they, if any string's going to slip on the post, it's these. So they need to be that whole fret's worth back, and it isn't hooking, so I'll just catch it and hold it now. Over the loose one first time, under the loose one the second time. Like so. What's interesting about this is it interesting? Yeah, probably have to tighten these up a fraction more. Or at least this one. Okay, so we're going to get the final high E string on now. And once that's on, we'll then stretch out sort of the gross slack, make sure everything's bedded in properly, and then we'll get into manually stretching the strings. Okay. So actually that's gone on more than twice round, but hey, not the end of the world. It often happens that the thin strings go on a bit more than twice. So there's all my extra bits, surplus bits chopped off, disposed of. Now if we zoom out, zoom right out, and we get a bit of a pull on these strings to make sure they're all bedded in properly, which they are. Give everything a pull, and then we'll get our first tuning done with the tuning fork to start us off. One of two tuning forks, which the other one is lost somewhere around here, which I'll find eventually. Now obviously with these strings, the high string, the high E, is always going to be the vulnerable one to breaking, so we've got to be very careful not to overstretch that. Okay. So what I then recommend you do, let's just tighten this up first. Next we're going to stretch out the strings manually. Okay. So just basically pick up the strings between thumb and forefinger and push and pull to get as much of the slack out of it as is possible. And what we'll hear is that as we go through this a couple of times, each time you'll hear it detuning, because we're venting the stored up slack. And of course, once we've got that out of the way, when we're in a good place to settle down, and it'll be playable from the get-go, as they say. But we expect, having done this manual stretching now, I expect the whole set of strings to be out of tune again. pretty good actually. Not that much. So again, we'll give it some more stretchings. You could do it with some bends if you're in the mood, big heavy bends, but I'm just pulling outwards to begin with, and then I'll do some more thumb and forefinger stretching. And also you want to get this stuff de-slacked as well if you can, especially on this reverse headstock, because you actually got quite a lot of material, a lot of string behind there to store slack. One of the things you might notice if you've ever had a guitar where the nut slots are wrong, i.e. they're not smooth running, is you'll notice, one of the first things you can notice is that when you tune the pegs, you seem to be turning the pegs but nothing's happening to the note. It doesn't appear to be rising or falling, and that's a very strong sign that your strings are basically holding up in the, they're sort of catching in the nut slot, and not moving until the force becomes great enough, and then they kind of lurch forward and suddenly the note changes. Pretty close now. Okay, let's just double check the playing action now. We've got the intonation to do next. The playing action down here is still a tiny fraction higher than I would like it, but we are as low as this is going to go without putting a shim on it. I don't think it's worth shimming it to get, like I say, about 0.2 of a mil, if that, probably less. I think everything else then from there is fine. Yeah, that's not bad at all. Okay, I think that's where I'm going to stay on that. Okay, so for the intonation part we need the tuner and our cable, and hoping that the intonation will be right from the factory, but not always the case. And don't forget, intonation is an individual thing. It has a lot depends on the variable, how hard you press the note down as you fret. So if you're a heavy presser, you'll make the notes go sharp more than I will if I'm a light presser. What we do is tune the harmonic ping to the E on the 12th fret, a harmonic 12th ping, make it a true E, and then fret it. It should be the same note, which it is. Now that B seemed fractionally sharp. I think some of these are a little sharp. I can see anyway, just looking at the settings, it's not a stagger that I recognize as being correct. So I'm going to set it the way I would expect it to be. Obviously that detunes it quite a bit, so I'll put it back together. Wrong bloody thing. Yay, done. Okay, my lovelies. Thankfully that was a trouble-free, light, relatively light setup. I mean, including precision leveling, but light in terms of not having to struggle with a nut for a long time. So we've used the one that was there, which was perfectly good. It started out high enough for me to be able to cut it down just that little bit that it needed. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So we're done. Everything else is good. Everything working nicely. The pickups are pretty well spaced and positioned compared to what they were. They were a bit out of kilter. Everything's good. New string trees in there. We'll get the old string trees out in case Michael wants them for another thing. I'm going to put the bit of that back on there, protect it for another day, and we'll stick the groovy label back on here. I think, if I can manage it. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you for watching. This is enough for me for today. I'll see you when I've got a bit more strength very soon.